Hello, 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 and welcome back to the IBS Freedom Podcast. Today we're going to talk about hairs, mostly the hairs on top of your head, but you never know. Maybe we'll talk about leg hairs, eyebrow hairs, armpit hairs. You just never know. This is our podcast, and we can talk about whatever hairs we want to. But Amy, you want to open us up since I opened us up real weird? What sort of
Oh, wow. How
things
do I
might
even?
come up in this hairy conversation?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're definitely going to be talking about hair loss. I know that you've been on a hair journey that we're going to hear more about too with hair
Indeed.
care and things like that. I will preface this by saying I still have no idea how to manage my own hair. Um, But I definitely have had hair loss before. I think you've had hair loss before too. So
Oh, yeah.
we can definitely talk about our stories, and maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
From my standpoint, so when I had a lot of hair loss was during my gut journey. I think I told you this when we were debating on doing a hair episode that I had so much hair loss and I always had the fan going in my room. And so my hair would collect in the corner of this room and it looked like just a hairball in the corner behind the door. Like my door would kind of slant open
Oh,
and all
goodness.
the airflow would just go to that corner.
A tumbleweed of
Oh
your
my
hair.
gosh, a tumbleweed of my hair. Um, and again, it was just a reminder of, oh, that's not right. That's off. I feel like I have bigger fish to fry. Other things were more bothersome to me. Um, but from my standpoint, it definitely was a huge indicator for me that something wasn't right. Um, for me, probably just overall nutrition being poor, like calories being low um, was probably the biggest reason that I was having so much hair loss. I had a lot of thyroid problems because my calories were low.
And it makes sense, right? Your body on some level was like, we have more important things to do.
Okay.
You don't need Vidal Sassoon commercial hair.
Right.
We just need
Well,
to heal our gut.
exactly. You just need your organs to function to keep you alive, essentially. If calories are low, your body's going to prioritize way way more important things maybe than hair, even though hair might be really important to you. Everyone gets a little freaked out when their hair starts falling out. It's like,
Totally.
what the hell does this mean? And just from a vanity standpoint, no one wants their hair to be coming out in handfuls. um so yeah, to me it's such a sign of overall health if your hair is healthy and you're not losing more than typical. Now, I will say, like, depending on what your hair is typically like if you have really thick hair, from my standpoint, there's going to be a natural amount of hair loss that you experience just day to day, which is important to keep in mind too.
And
Um,
actually, can I interrupt you for a sec?
yeah,
I've
for sure.
seen this as I've learned about hair, like on the internet, but also I saw this in a research paper when I was prepping for today's episode. The average amount of hair shedding per day is about 100 to 150 strands of hair
Mm,
every day. So
yeah.
that is going to look especially profound if you have longer hair, right? Like if
Mm.
you have 150 really long strands of hair, that's going to make a huge hairball every day versus if you had shorter hair, like you might not notice the strands as much, but that's something to keep in mind is that there is quite a lot of hair shedding that's normal, but I think a lot of people have a sense of like what is normal for them. And
Yep.
they become concerned when it feels like an increase from their pre existing baseline.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I've noticed too is through the years, I used to wash my hair every day because I was working out all the time and it would just gross me out if I was super sweaty and just like going to bed with sweaty, gross hair. Um, so I used to wash my hair on a daily basis, where now I don't really do hard workouts on the daily. So I might wash my hair twice a week or three times a week. I actually think my hair is more healthy because of it. But I do notice the less I wash, there is a slight uptick in loss when I wash it, too. So even the frequency of washing probably will affect your perception of how much you're losing on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Um,
And I've
but I,
noticed the same thing.
yeah, and I do think you're dead on too, that usually you're going to have a baseline and what that looks like for you. What the normal amount is and what would be increased. Uh, and it is interesting too when hair growth happens, you'll see new hair formation. I know for me, my hair thinned a lot, and then you could see new growth. It was very evident once things took a turn to where I had almost new growth um, in sort of this area that you could see. It's interesting too because usually hairdressers notice stuff too. So that's another maybe resource is, and some hairdressers might be extra polite, but a lot of them will say like, "Oh, like what's going on? Seems like you're losing a little bit more or like things are thinning." Um Sometimes hairdressers can notice stuff like that. I know my sister-in-law is a hairdresser, and she would always notice if I had new growth. Um, so even as just like a marker of progress, sometimes a hairdresser could notice, oh yeah, like some new growth forming.
Well, and you just reminded me of something too, is that hair loss I find difficult to work with clinically,
Mm,
largely in part because the progress is so painfully slow.
yeah.
If you think about how long it took you to grow your hair to its current length, like this length, I don't have super long hair at the moment right now, but this could be years worth of growth that I'm looking at right now. And if I'm trying to grow a few more strands of hair, like that might be years in the making. And I say this from personal experience. When I lost a lot of hair a few years ago, I freaked. And
Mm,
I know this stuff and I try not to psych myself out. And I know how important like stress is. And I try to not overly stress about it. But it was really, really freaky to lose a lot of hair all of a sudden. And and I get the mental state that people can be in when this affects them because it very quickly turns into a frantic, desperate, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
mm,
And I think that for me, at least, what I saw is that I was able to slow down the shedding in a fairly quick amount of time, but I didn't see like increased thickness or increased volume in my hair for a while after that.
yeah.
Right, like because it takes months, if not years, of growth to really see the results of that. Versus, I could tell that I was just losing a bit less in the shower or in the hairbrush.
Yeah.
For me, I don't remember losing hair when I was in like my IBS kind of journey, but
Mm,
for me, thankfully it was very clear. It was so obvious what the cause was at the time. So I seem to remember 2020 for us here in North Carolina. There was talk about everything shutting down and doing a lockdown. I think on March 14th or 15th, and like the first whispers were kicking in. And I remember getting a haircut like the Thursday or Friday prior. And I remember it was at that stage where like it wasn't set in stone yet. And I was like, oh, should I even go to this haircut? Is this okay for me to go to this appointment? I guess
it
so.
escalated. It did escalate quickly, and it was just confusing. It was a very confusing time.
Yeah. So I was like, and I remember thinking, no, I'd better just go for this haircut because if I don't go now, it might be like weeks until I can get back in. Oh, how naive I was. How naive we all were. But anyway, so I got a hair trim on like the Thursday or Friday prior. And then it was basically, I think it was St. Patrick's Day. I think it was the 17th
Mm.
when everything here in North Carolina shut down officially. And it was like the next day that I started noticing clumps in the shower. And that persisted for a good month, month and a half in the beginning of the lockdown. And I think I figured out fairly quickly that it was stress related. Like I did sort of the normal stuff. Like I did eventually test my thyroid. I tested my iron level. I tested, I don't even know what else, but I tested some of the usual suspects and they
Mm,
all looked fine at the time. But eventually, like after a week or two or three of going after the usual suspects, I kind of had a little bit more of a come to Jesus moment with myself. And I realized, girl,
mm,
you're stressed. Because A, we all were. And B, as a business owner, I didn't know
mm,
what was going to happen with my business. I didn't know, the state of the world as far as like how it was going to affect my family and our finances and it was really stressful. So it was around that time that I started to pivot and I did some other supportive things which I'll get into in a little bit, but one of the big things I did was I started painting because I
mm,
basically realized you are hella stressed and you
mm.
need to do something for you. I don't know what, but you need to do something for yourself clearly, and this is where I landed. I landed with picking up a new hobby and painting. And yeah, I think if I remember correctly, I think I got the shedding to slow down within about 5 or 6 weeks of when it began,
Mm.
which is pretty quick turnaround time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little bit of my hair loss story. But I remember telling my husband jokingly, but not jokingly, that I didn't want to be the bald YouTube lady. It
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
oh my God, I have to figure this out. I don't want to be the bald YouTuber lady.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I'm glad I figured it out.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably good for us both to talk about our own story because this is a really common issue and it probably does ebb and flow for women in particular. I feel like in some way I almost feel like men sometimes just are like, well, it's I'm someone that's going to lose my hair,
Happened to
there's
my dad. It was bound to
right.
happen to me.
And again, there definitely could be a genetic there's definitely a genetic component there. There could also be other components for male hair loss too. Um, but yeah, I think for women in particular, hair just being, you know, having a little bit more vanity behind it because I don't know, I love having hair.
I know, I love my
Pretty
hair.
devastating
Like, I
as
didn't
a
want to
woman
lose
to lose
it.
your hair. Um, but yeah, from my standpoint, um, the biggest thing, especially nutrition related, and I mentioned it, and I know we mentioned it, that it makes sense that you really want to make sure you're getting overall nutrition. Um, and I know Nikki sent me an article that talked about different micronutrients and things to potentially consider too that I reviewed to prepare. We actually prepared a little bit for this episode. Good on us.
That's right.
Um, but interestingly enough, when I read it, it's one of those things where I do think that there's some micronutrient components, but I still think you don't want to get too lost in the weeds with the micronutrients if you're not getting enough to eat in general, because I mean that plays into your micronutrients too.
Yeah.
So some of these studies where they're looking at a single micronutrient and maybe that person isn't getting enough total calories in and it's just depleting it's depleting certain micronutrients because their overall intake is low. But yeah, I think you don't want to miss a huge obvious sign that just calories are lacking.
Yeah.
Because like we said, if you don't have enough energy, the body's not going to want to use resources to maintain hair. It's going to want to use resources more efficiently than that. It sees hair as like a luxury
It
that
is.
you can't afford.
It honestly is. It's decorative,
Right.
right? Like, and you could think of it this way. If you had a house and you only had a certain amount of time and money to spend building that house, would you focus on the floor and the roof? Or would you
Yeah.
focus on like decorative throw pillows?
Right.
Obviously, you wouldn't worry about the damn pillows. You would just focus on the foundational structural components of the house. And, your body is smart enough to prioritize the heart and the lungs and the brain and the digestive system first and foremost.
Mm.
And then, if it has the ability, then you might get into hormones, which directly play into hair loss also. And then you get into the decorative shit. So
Yeah. Well,
it's like,
and
this is like third tier down in
right.
priorities.
Well, in a weird way too, it being decorative, I think from an evolutionary standpoint, if it might affect mating as well, if it makes you more attractive to the opposite sex, obviously, look at us with our beautiful locks. But if it makes you more attractive to the opposite sex, then it again might promote reproduction in some way. And reproduction also is kind of not a high priority when your
It is
resources are
optional.
limited.
Yeah.
Right. So that shuts down. But yeah, it more often than not, I think that that's the major culprit in our clients. Now, I think iron is a huge one that seems to have a probably the most evidence behind it from a micronutrient standpoint. If you know that you're getting enough to eat, probably the next, I would say protein might be another factor. It wasn't in the article specifically that I looked at. The article is more about micronutrients, but I do think protein can be really important too. If someone's just historically on a lower protein diet, that might be another box to check. But once you've ruled out protein, once you have ruled out overall nutrition, or overall calories, I should say, then maybe look at iron being potentially a big factor. Um, from a nutritional standpoint, that's probably the nutrient that has the most evidence behind it. Um, there's like there's a few other things to consider depending on what might be driving your hair loss too. And it could be something that we break down a little bit more because there is hair loss that's more autoimmune. Um,
Yeah, we could have said that at the beginning, I guess, is that there is an autoimmune condition, alopecia areata, and that we're going to kind of separate a little bit because it's
yeah,
pretty clear it's pretty clear that that is a consequence of the autoimmune disease, and you need to think more in the context of the autoimmune disease.
right.
Now, nutrition and vitamins and minerals and stress and the things that we're talking about definitely will affect an autoimmune disease, but there's
Mm,
probably more of a dominant inflammatory component for the autoimmune condition versus we're really talking about people with like mystery weird hair loss and they don't know why and they're trying to figure out why they have especially diffuse hair loss, meaning that it's not in a patch, it's not like just in the middle of your head, the top of your head, the
right.
forehead area, it's like all over the place, you're just shedding hair.
Yeah.
But to go back to your point, I found an article that looked at serum ferritin and vitamin D.
Mm,
Literally, the title is Serum Ferritin and Vitamin D Levels Should Be Evaluated in Patients with Diffuse Hair Loss Prior to Treatment, which
mm,
is a pretty bold statement. If anybody wants to read it, PubMed ID is 327-92884. But basically, they were looking at ferritin, folate, B12, zinc, TSH, and vitamin D in these patients. And the
mm,
two that they found correlated with the folks who had hair loss ended up being ferritin and vitamin D.
mm.
So, those other nutrients could very well play some role too. If you're horrendously folate deficient or horrendously zinc deficient, then certainly that could play a role. But when the researchers looked at blood levels of these nutrients and looked to see what was different between the patients with hair loss versus the controls, it looked like ferritin and vitamin D were the biggies. And of
Yeah.
note, they said, so for this group, they actually said that the the mean serum ferritin level for the patients with hair loss was about 15, which is right at
Ooh.
the LabCorp cutoff,
Yeah, it's pretty low.
right? That's where LabCorp flags you. So that's really low. And then they said for the people who did not have hair loss, they said that the mean was about 25, which still isn't great,
Yeah.
but it's a good solid 10 points higher.
It's like it's literally I think it's a really good indicator of how low iron typically is across the board. It's the most common nutrient deficiency.
Yeah,
So,
it's huge.
um
But I will say, can I be a party pooper and play devil's advocate for a second?
for yeah, Or
for us, like just conversationally. So
yeah,
not to poke holes at what we just said, because guys, iron is important. Never forget it. Iron is important. It's important for your gut. It's important for your gut brain axis, making stomach acid, running your thyroid, getting blood flow to literally any of your tissues. Iron is a big deal. However, it goes to show you that this is a complex kind of thing. My best friend from high school has had iron deficiency anemia and low ferritin for decades at this point,
right.
and she grows hair like friggin' Sailor Moon on my t-shirt. She is always donating her dang hair to Locks of Love, and or whatever organization does that these days. So I do think that there are going to be people who can have low ferritin and
Right.
still generate an awful lot of hair. I don't know. It's I
Yeah.
don't think that any one factor is the end all be all for this. Because I
Right.
just thought it was worth mentioning, because oftentimes folks, again, are in this very like understandably desperate state, and they're so desperate to figure it out and get answers, and they're spinning their wheels. And I think oftentimes people are looking for the holy grail, or like the one thing. So just, you want to look at the whole body as much as you
Yeah.
can, and don't hyper focus and hyper obsess over one nutrient or one particular thing. But
Yeah.
I like your starting point. Number one, just, are you eating enough food? Because if you're not getting enough calories, you're not going to run your thyroid, and your body knows damn well that hair is optional, and it's just not going to deal with the hair thing.
Mm.
Then after the calorie thing, I agree with you. I think protein probably is pretty big. And then after that, you can get into individual nutrients. Of
I,
note, I
oh,
ended up cheating
sorry.
on you a little bit, Amy. I
Cheating
sent
on me.
I I sent
Cheating on
you the
me?
one
You were cheating on
article.
me? Huh? Huh? Huh?
I sent you the one article and tasked you with reading that article. But then I found another one the other night, and I was skimming through it in
Yeah.
preparation for this episode. And they actually did mention protein.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the one that I read is was mainly about micronutrients. They didn't really talk as much about the macros or anything like that.
Yeah,
Um,
these guys kind of looked at it. They mentioned some studies where they were looking at individual amino acids being
mm,
deficient.
yeah.
And, there were a couple of them that I thought were interesting. One of them is histidine.
Mm,
And that's going to become interesting in like a nanosecond when I tie in something else. But histidine is the amino acid that can turn into histamine. So usually people with histamine issues will avoid high histidine foods,
mm,
because it has the potential to convert into histamine, and they don't want the excess histamine burden.
mm,
So it was interesting when they found that more of the patients with diffuse hair loss had a histidine like dietary deficiency.
mm,
But also they mentioned specifically cysteine. And
mm.
my deep love for cysteine and N-acetylcysteine. And when I had my hair loss, one of the things I noticed around that time, I happened to get a Nutra-Eval done, just literally for shits and giggles. I had no purpose in running it. I just thought it would be fun.
Right.
And I ran that like maybe the week before the pandemic hit.
Mm,
And I got those results back, and it showed that I had low glutathione. And I was like,
mm,
ooh, that's not good.
right.
Glutathione, the master detoxifier, the master antioxidant, big freaking deal for the immune system. That's not cool. And so around the same time, when I started managing my stress better, I also started supplementing with some glutathione. And then eventually I pivoted to N-acetylcysteine. So I kind of wonder now too, because looking at my chronometer data over the last year or more, I pretty consistently don't hit my mark on dietary cysteine. And
Mm,
for that reason, and just knowing that cysteine helped boost my glutathione and how important that is, I just take a little bit of N-acetylcysteine every single day to supplement around the fact that I don't get a ton of it in my diet, despite
yeah.
eating eggs, despite eating meat. So yeah, just
Yeah.
knowing how anti-inflammatory and amazing glutathione is, and you need cysteine to make glutathione, and knowing my own history that when
Yeah.
I had hair loss, my glutathione was a bit low, and I apparently don't get a lot of dietary cysteine.
Mm.
It all kind of made sense to me when I saw cysteine pop up as one of the amino
Yeah.
acids.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Yeah, that's so fascinating. Yeah, but I'm glad that you found a article supporting protein. The only other thing that I didn't mention that was kind of coming to mind was carb intake as well, actually being a big factor just because of how it affects hormones. Um, from a thyroid hormone standpoint, if you're not eating enough carbs, it tends to lower insulin, which prevents thyroid activation, and it can cause hair loss. Same thing. I think that there can potentially be some cortisol factors related to hair loss too that might not love being low carb. So that's something else to consider. So probably just macro
Yeah.
balance is going to be important across the board. Um,
Yeah.
Making sure you're
Well,
getting adequate protein, adequate carbs is important.
yeah. Well, and actually, you just made a little spark go off in my brain, a little light bulb moment, too. The article that I was reading didn't explicitly mention carbs that I recall,
Mm.
but you know what they did mention? Estrogen to testosterone ratio.
Mm.
And if you think about it, the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen is called aromatase. And one of the things that turns on aromatase and pulls your testosterone and turns it into estrogen is insulin.
Yeah.
So, especially for women, if you put yourself on on a low carb, low insulin provocation diet, you are naturally going to stimulate aromatase way less and not convert as much of your testosterone into estrogen. Honestly,
Mm.
this could be a really interesting and really easy to do research study is to take people before they go keto and
Mm.
measure their hormones at baseline and then have them go keto and measure their hormones after they go keto for a while and then have them
Mm.
reintroduce carbs and remeasure their hormones because I bet you anything keto will probably end up being an estrogen lowering diet at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be fascinating. We should probably do an insulin episode.
Yeah, we should, honestly.
Um, but yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind from maybe a variety of different angles.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other thing I will mention about the thyroid that could be kind of interesting, um, the article that I read about hair loss, I said hair lost, about hair loss was talking about selenium toxicity also leading to hair loss. This might be relevant if you are hypothyroid and you're supplementing with a bunch of selenium. Um, we actually typically do get a decent amount of selenium in the diet, especially if you're eating enough protein rich foods. Um, so it might really not be something that you want to supplement heavily. I think they were saying usually at doses of maybe 400 milligrams or more, but a lot of people are supplementing 200 milligrams. If you're getting a lot in your diet, you could be getting a little bit closer to that 400 milligram or microgram, I mean, microgram, I think, not milligram. Wait, was it milligram? I needed to circle back. I think it might have been microgram.
I think microgram, but I can't swear to that.
Yeah, let me just check, just so I'm not
That's
leading you astray. But
that's right.
yeah, I think from my standpoint, yeah, it's microgram. I'm pretty sure. After reading this, here we are. Yeah, 400 micrograms daily is usually what leads to toxicity. Um, Chris Masterjohn talked a little bit about selenium toxicity at one point. But yeah, I mean, if you're just doing a blanket thyroid protocol or something that has a lot of selenium that you might not need, um, I mean, you could always check your chronometer just to ensure you're getting enough of it. But I find that that's something that most people get enough of,
Yeah, that's
typically.
well, and if you take a multivitamin too,
Right.
I'm tempted to run and grab a bottle off the shelf right now and see like what my favorite multivitamin has in it for selenium, but I know that it's a pretty decent amount. So you
Right.
combine that with whatever you're getting in food, and then yeah, maybe you're taking like a hair, skin, nail formula
Right.
or a thyroid formula, and you could easily be overdoing it on selenium. I think zinc too, like dietary zinc, if you eat meat, you probably do pretty okay with dietary zinc. But then if you combine like a multivitamin or like an immune gummy, like I know that they make vitamin C and zinc gummies and elderberry and zinc gummies that people will take in the winter, for example. There's a very real possibility to get more zinc than you intended, and then that can inhibit iron absorption potentially if you overdo it too much.
Yeah. A lot of the minerals affect the other minerals in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. So if you're overdoing it on anything, it can be probably problematic from a mineral standpoint. But zinc's interesting too because I think it's pretty easy to go over the 40 milligram to the limit that I think can drive nausea. Zinc is one that definitely can drive nausea a lot too. So sometimes I'll look out for that if someone's taking a zinc on its own and then also taking a multi and then what they're eating, they could be hitting a zinc point that's too high. And taking higher doses for a short period of time might be okay if you have an infection or I don't know, sometimes for different skin things, like acne uses zinc a lot. Or again, if you have an outright deficiency and you're taking zinc for a month or something and stopping. Um, and there's ways to get around the nausea. Definitely taking it with food helps. But yeah, I think that that's something to be a little careful with sometimes is how much zinc you're taking. Oh, sorry, I have a yawn that came on.
We're boring her.
Yeah,
Sorry,
this
we're so
hair
boring,
episode
Amy.
is boring.
No,
Yeah.
no, it actually it ended up being a much bigger can of worms than I think I realized when I first proposed the topic because
Mm.
again, I thought it was going to be kind of a conversation of, you know, some basic nutrition stuff and inflammation and call it a day and maybe touch on hormones. But
Mm.
as I thought through it and kind of made my notes for today, I realized that it's a pretty big differential list of what could be causing the problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think minerals are very persnickety and they interfere with each other. I don't know if taking excess selenium messes with anybody else. I think that's one of the few ones that might not, that we are aware of at least,
Mm.
but zinc definitely would. Other nutrients that come up a lot in like hair, skin, nail formulas are like biotin, for example.
Hmm.
But what I found interesting in the article, by the way, I feel like this episode has turned into like us competing about who read the better article. Does it feel like we're just
Hey,
like duking it
I
out back
don't
and forth right now?
know. I think you're giving
It,
different information than my article, so maybe we just did
complimenting.
it right. Yeah, we're
I
complimenting
think we
things.
did it great. But this article specifically said, despite contrary belief or despite, what's commonly out there, biotin does not help your hair grow. Biotin
Mm.
makes your hair stronger.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
is way different.
Yeah.
And even like when my hair was falling out and I was in panic mode, freaking the F out, one of the things I did was I ran and I got a biotin supplement because, it's cheap. Why not? But yeah, biotin doesn't actually help your hair grow, apparently.
Mm.
It will help strengthen your hair, but that's totally different than what a lot of people are going for. Maybe if you're trying to
Yeah.
prevent like split ends and you're trying to grow your hair longer, maybe that would be occasion to pay more attention to biotin. But
Right.
if you're trying to stimulate new growth, biotin is actually not the most important nutrient you need to focus on.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. In the article I read, they listed a bunch of studies, but then they kind of say that, biotin supplementation doesn't really help. It isn't supported by evidence-based trials. So people that are supplementing with biotin doesn't seem to help with hair shedding. They did say that sometimes there can be low biotin levels, but it was nothing, wild.
Not
Uh,
like a ferritin of 14.
right, exactly. Not the like I said, iron has by far the most evidence to support a micronutrient potentially being involved in hair loss. But yeah, the biotin scenario, it doesn't stop companies from selling it. And again, maybe my article didn't really talk about it. It's strengthening hair, but I mean, that makes sense.
And it
But
makes sense
yeah,
why it doesn't really help people with the shedding and the hair
right.
loss, right? Like that's not what it does. It's you know the GIF, the meme. I think it was from a commercial, and it's like the older women are like, "Come look at my wall," and then they're putting physical pictures on the actual wall, and then the other older lady is like, "That's not how this works.
Oh
That's
my
not how
God.
any of this works." Like I feel like that's kind of what I want to say now with the biotin thing. Like that's not.
Right.
No, you were so
Yeah.
close, but so far.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing that is really pretty well supported, I think, is inflammation.
Yeah.
And okay, here's the thing: the human body is designed very well in the sense that if one tissue is inflamed, you don't always see that show up systemically. So, if your scalp is inflamed, you won't necessarily see blood indicators like C
Mm.
reactive protein or homocysteine or glyce A or sed rate. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. Similarly, if you were to survey every single patient with Hashimoto's or every single patient with, I don't know, gout, not
Mm.
all of those patients with inflammatory conditions are going to have elevated systemic inflammatory markers.
Mm.
So, starting off the conversation, I know I'm talking about inflammation, and I do like trying to measure these inflammatory markers in blood on a routine basis to kind of track what your baseline body-wide level of inflammation is, but having normal blood markers doesn't intrinsically get you off the hook for this, so keep that in mind. But you know what was interesting? In that article where I was reading and they got into the inflammation section, there was a
Mm.
very distinct flavor of inflammation that kept coming up in multiple ways.
Mm.
And it was the Th2 dominant, histaminic, mast cell driven,
Mm.
IgE producing, allergenic style of inflammation, which I found
Mm.
very interesting. Now, I know I've also seen papers that suggest Th17 involvement,
Mm.
which is a different kind of pathway. But this particular paper brought up mast cells, like increased infiltration of mast cells in the scalp of people with diffuse hair loss,
Mm.
increased levels of IgE, which is the antibody of the allergic response. I think that the mast cells that are in the scalp are degranulating more often than that of people without hair loss. Came up in a couple of different ways, but I remember thinking, this makes sense. But if
Yeah.
you tie it back, if people have histamine issues, they're probably going to avoid dietary histidine, which could be problematic, right? Because maybe the
Right.
protein then is important or the amino acid. And a lot of our folks that we work with, not all of them, but a fair amount of people we work with have tried to go on a low sulfur diet. Well, if you're on a low sulfur diet, you sure as heck aren't getting enough dietary cysteine.
Yeah.
So it's like some people might be on the right track. They might know that they have a histamine issue or even a hypothesized mast cell issue, and they might be sort of on the right track, but then some of the treatments for that thing could actually be making a backpedal. So it's like even if you fix the histamine issue or you manage the histamine issue, you might be creating a different issue with protein deficiency, for example. So there's a couple of
Yeah.
balls in the air to juggle.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're right. Definitely inflammation. And that could be why, to some degree, things like stress. I mean, stress affects so many aspects, but how stress degranulates mast cells, causes a lot more
Totally.
inflammation.
And
And
stress tips that Th1, Th2
mm,
scale in favor of Th2 dominance.
right.
And stress also tends to suck up your glutathione and make you glutathione deficient. So stress kind of puts a nice bow on the whole package when you think of it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I definitely think stress in and of itself um can definitely cause it. High periods of stress can
For
cause
sure.
hair loss.
Yeah, I mean, I'm living proof of that. There's no other viable reason why that happened. And again, it was like the day after lockdown started. It was
Oh God, yeah.
clear as day. And
All
actually, I
hell is breaking loose.
it was the world was ending, and
Yeah.
And like, I have a family to support. And a business to run. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen with the world. And I think I was more
Yeah.
freaked out internally than I was outwardly showing,
Mm,
which we've talked about
yeah.
before. That's kind of my MO, is that I'll just
Yeah.
bottle stuff up and shove it down
Mm,
and not be consciously aware of it. So,
mm,
yeah. And interestingly, too, on the stress front. So, again, so stress tips your immune system in favor of histamine, Th2, IgE, mast cell kind of stuff. And that seems to be involved in hair loss at the scalp level. Stress sucks up your glutathione and makes you glutathione deficient, which is going to increase inflammation, but also suck up all of your cysteine. And that might also play a role in hair loss twofold. But also, I found some other mechanisms talked about, and this was something really clear in the research too when I was visiting this. Stress increases substance P, which apparently is associated with hair loss. It decreases proteoglycan synthesis and hyaluronic acid synthesis, and it promotes the shifting of the hair follicle from what they call anagen into telogen phase, which it's like the four stages of the life cycle of the hair. The hair will be in a growth phase, then it goes into a resting phase, or sorry, growth, then regression, then rest, then it sheds.
mm,
And it basically, stress chemistry like cortisol takes the hair follicles out of their growth phase and encourages them to transition over into that rest phase. And then the next phase after that is the shedding. So
mm.
there's like at least 5 different ways that stress can F up your hair and make you lose all your hair. And again, I, I think that there's
Right.
probably a few of those involved for me, but
Yeah.
yeah, that freaking stress, man, it'll get you.
Oof. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think if I have anything else major. I do have a question about hair. I'm very confused why Chip doesn't need a haircut. Like his hair just doesn't grow. Like it sheds some, you know? Or maybe
Yeah,
it just grows and sheds, but we never cut his hair. It
yeah.
just stays the same length.
Well, I'm not a veterinarian. For those of you who don't know,
Anyone
Chip is
knows,
her dog.
please let us know. But other dogs, get all mangy and like crazy looking, if
Well,
they
dogs that have hair instead of fur. I think that's the
Oh
way I've
yeah.
heard it said. Like,
Okay.
if they have hair like a poodle, then they'll need a haircut. But if they
Mhm.
have like fur, then not so much. And I think probably the difference goes back to what I was just visiting with the different stages of the life cycle of a hair follicle. I think that article said that on average, the hair on top of your head is in the growth phase for like 8 years. And
Mm.
then it'll transition to regression and then resting. And I think it's at that rest stage for maybe like 3 months and then it sheds. And I know that they were talking about like other parts of your body, because similarly, you don't have to trim your eyebrow hair, right?
Yeah.
Most of us, at least. I mean, my grandfather did when he was old enough. He had crazy wild hairs that would just go everywhere, and he would trim those, and like nose hairs and ear hairs. But most of our lives, we don't have to trim any other hairs aside from the ones on our head. So I think it's like the epigenetics and the programming of those cells in distinct areas of the body. They are
Mm.
kind of trained to be in the growth phase for a much shorter period of
Right.
time, and then they might be in the rest phase for a really long time and then they shed, versus the hair on our head, it lives most of its life in the growth phase,
Mm.
and then it's in the rest phase for only a couple of months before we shed it.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was just trying to Google it. All that came up was why is my dog's hair growing, was all these things that were wrong with the dog, not, specific breeds or something that don't need groomed. And then I was like, why do I not need to groom my dog? And nothing was coming up. So we need answers to move on with our life. So if anyone knows, if anyone is a vet, you can comment below. If
Comment
you're on
below
YouTube, if
and
you're on
help Amy
YouTube,
sleep at night.
I know just tossing and turning all night because
Well,
I
you're going to
need
have to wait a
answers.
while because we are recording this episode in late August and it's probably not going to post until sometime in October. So
Why?
good month of
The
no sleep for
horror.
Amy. Sorry.
Right. Oh my
Let me
God.
think if I had anything else to share. Um, and I had some notes here to go off of. Oh, actually, I had two other things.
Yeah.
Hormonally, just really briefly, I wanted to touch on. I think that probably out of all the things we talked about today, the one thing that most people understand the most would be the hormone thing.
Hmm.
So, diffuse hair loss can be a sign of hypothyroidism, potentially. High androgens, particularly DHT. So you would see this in women with PCOS, for example. That could be a symptom of high DHT levels. I mentioned briefly that some articles had looked at the ratio of estrogen to free testosterone. So that balancing act, and maybe carbs would be involved in the ratio there. And the paper I was reading suggested that the ratio between those two might matter more than the absolute value of either hormone.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
like, you could have more testosterone if you also have more estrogen to counteract it, is basically what it comes down to.
Right.
There were also a couple of studies that they mentioned that said that putting women on hormonal birth control pills resolved hair loss in a lot
Mm.
of instances. I think it was like 80 or 90% efficacy, which I thought was
Ah,
pretty wild.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. So now here's the thing, hormonal birth control pills come with a whole host of side
Right.
effects and nasties,
Mm.
increased risk of DVT and stroke, for example. And they
Serious
often,
nasties.
huh?
Serious nasties.
Yeah, serious nasty. So we're not necessarily promoting the use of that, but I thought it was interesting, and it furthers the hypothesis that hormones are involved in
Mm.
this, which is why I thought I'd share that.
Yeah.
But there was one other section, and admittedly, I didn't get a chance to read this section of the article. I just glanced at it for a quick moment before hopping on today. But there was a little section too about sleep and clock genes being involved.
Mm.
And I thought that was very interesting. A, because we know sleep and stress oftentimes are interwoven
Mm-hmm.
and affect each other. Like if you're super stressed, you can't sleep. If you can't sleep, you're going to be hella stressed about it. So
Right.
there's that kind of interplay. And we know that sleep is very important for the entire body to function. So there's that angle. But I thought it was very interesting for me personally. So in the episode that we recorded last time, and I think that they're going to go in order. I forget if we're reordering them when we post them. But in our episode Work in Progress, I shared that one of the things I'm trying to work on is going to bed at a reasonable time and waking up at a reasonable time and being more consistent with, meal timing and bedtime.
Mm.
And we recorded that episode just over a week ago. And I kid you not, I'm already having more bowel regularity as a consequence of being really on top of that. So I'm super psyched about this revelation. But you know what's funny? I slowed down the hair shedding relatively quickly after it happened. But then that kind of launched me into being interested in hair a little bit more.
Mm.
And I started realizing at some point since the pandemic, I realized, oh, my hair grows really slowly.
Mm.
Huh. And it's annoying. Like I got this, I've been at about this length, give or take maybe an inch for a really long time. And I'm at a
Mm.
phase now in my life where I'm like, I want to grow out long, luxurious locks. Gosh darn it. So I'm kind of actively exploring ways to grow my hair longer quicker because I'm frankly impatient. And I saw that bit about the clock and the sleep genes playing a role. And I was like, son of a monkey wrench, it's all connected. Here, here's another reason why I need to be more mindful of my sleep and circadian rhythm and meal timing
Yeah.
and just really taking that seriously when it's something that I haven't done a super great job of. Honestly, it hasn't ever been super duper high priority to me. And I
Right.
just laughed because I was like, well, Nikki, you silly goose, here I am. I'm doing like hair oils and silk pillowcases and bonnets and deep conditioning treatments. I'm doing all of this stuff for my hair. And
Oh my
maybe I
gosh.
just need to work out my damn circadian rhythm. So I laughed.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and
Yeah.
remember when that big meanie shaved some of your hair for your
I
surgery?
do. Yes, let's call him out right now. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I had ear surgery in January and they shaved a bunch of my hair. So this is the current status. So
Oh, it's kind of cute.
I assure you, it is not cute.
She
So,
cute. I like her.
so when I wear my hair in a ponytail, these guys don't go back in the ponytail. They're just kind of like hanging out right here. Oh, goodness. But I had that surgery over 8 months ago, and that's all I got.
Yeah.
I've got like, what, 3, 4 inches of
Yeah.
growth there. So, yeah, maybe I just need to be more mindful of my circadian rhythm and stress, and that's the answer for me. But I laughed. I laughed at myself when I read that because here I am doing the exotic
Right.
things. I'm getting, and and I will share as a quick side too. I think I wanted more of this episode to be about metabolic and nutritional things, but there's a whole wide world of Instagram Reels and TikTok people that you can learn about hair from. And, you could explore the porosity of your hair. Do you have low porosity hair or high porosity hair? You could explore all of these different aspects of your hair to find like the right hair oils and stuff. As a starting point, though, I'll share rosemary essential oil. You could dilute that in a carrier oil and apply that to your scalp, and that a lot of people swear by. Lavender essential oil to some degree, also. One that a lot of people talk about is castor oil and applying that to your scalp. I don't know if you have ever touched castor oil, Amy. It is the thickest, stickiest stuff you will ever experience in your life. It is gross. And I tried to apply it to my hair on my head one time and one time only, and I vowed never to do it again
Oh my God.
because it was like I couldn't rub it in. It was so thick. Does that make sense? Like I wasn't able to like do this kind of a thing and really
Mm.
massage it into my scalp. It was just like a thick goo on top of the hair.
Mm.
And I struggled with it, and I decided I was probably ripping out more of my hair trying to massage it into my hair than I would actually grow from the castor oil itself. So I gave up. But some people swear by that. I think if my hair wasn't so fine, it could be okay.
Mm.
Like if I had thicker, tougher hair follicles or hair strands, maybe it would be better. But yeah, castor oil is one that people swear by.
Mm.
And just like not going to bed with your hair wet and sleeping with like a satin or a silky pillowcase and wearing your hair in like a loose braid or something, like protecting the hair when you sleep, like those sorts of things can probably help too. Even just massaging your head. A lot of people swear by doing a scalp massage and they'll get fancy schmancy little brushes to do that. But I just try to massage with my fingers on occasion.
Mm.
But yeah, those are some of the hair care tips that I have.
Nice.
Now, Amy, I think that we've covered the hair thing in depth. Can I share something with you that is completely unrelated to the topic today?
Sure.
If you said no, I'd be so mad.
I'm nervous now though. Is it as good as the Subway
It's probably not as
story?
good as Subway,
Oh
but
man.
it's
Is it
in
a
the
funny?
same.
Is it the
It's
funnies?
funny. It's a funny
Okay.
thing. So, I saw an actual monster in real life the other
Okay.
day, and I need everybody to know about it. So I flew to Phoenix. I was there for like a business coaching work kind of thing, and so I flew from my home in North Carolina to Phoenix, stayed for a few days, and then I flew back to North Carolina. And when I was in the airport in Phoenix getting ready to leave, I had a direct flight back to Raleigh. And I looked up in the crowd at the airport and I saw a human being and I immediately knew that I had seen him before, despite not recognizing his face, his hair, his clothes. Nothing about his body did I recognize, but I knew in my soul that I had encountered this human being before because I knew he was a monster. Do you know What told me he was a monster?
What?
He was walking around, not a care in the world, around the airport with a backpack strap totally and completely twisted. So
Oh God.
twisted, so uncomfortable looking. I snapped like a crazy person. I had to quickly snap a photo of him and text it to my mom and Mike because I was in such disbelief that such a monster exists in the world. How do you walk around with a backpack strap all lumpy on the one side and he's just not a care in the world walking around the airport like that? So so I'm texting my mom and Mike and I was right behind him in line getting on the plane. And I was like, it's taking every ounce of control for me to not reach out and fix the strap for him.
Oh my
Right?
gosh.
Like, like if you see something and you're just like, oh, I could just fix it real quick. I was inhibiting every part of my brain, trying to not fix the backpack strap for him. And it was so deeply stressful. And I was texting my mom and Mike, like, I'm gonna combust. I don't know what to do. I'm so stressed by this. So we get on the plane, we fly home to Raleigh. Everything is all well and good. Well, then
Oh
we're waiting.
God.
We're waiting for our baggage, and who do I see? Strappy strap man. But it was worse. Both of his
Oh
straps were
no.
twisted
Oh no.
simultaneously. I almost lost my mind, and I could see him from like the other side of the carousel thing, and I all I could do was frantically text my mom and Mike and say, I can't believe this. Strappy strap is back. Ah. And yeah, and apparently I think that monster lives somewhere in the greater Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill Triangle area. So
Oh
I
my
might see
God.
him at a grocery store or a concert or something later in my life and be immediately triggered
Oh
by
God.
this like twitch in my brain. But it stressed me out so deeply to see this. It just my brain doesn't understand.
You should have just reached out and fixed it.
Can you
You should have
imagine?
been that weirdo.
I
Yeah.
know. Well, I'm a weirdo either way. Like I took a
I
picture of
know.
the man behind his back and he didn't even know.
Right.
Like that's weird.
Right.
But I felt like, yeah, I had to do something. And
You gotta be
I
like,
needed to share
listen,
that.
listen, hun, I gotta fix your strap. It's really triggering me.
I could just imagine too, like if I had gone up at when we were at baggage claim and both of the straps were fixed, like just gone up, like,
Yeah.
all right, sir, what's your brain lesion? Let's talk. And again, I didn't recognize his face when I saw him the second time, but I knew it was him because I remembered, oh my God, I saw that twisted strap in the airport when
Right.
we landed, and it stressed me out now then, and it's stressing me out now. That's the
Oh.
same guy. So yeah, it's funny how that worked. And now I have it etched into my brain and I will never forget who I call Strappy Strap.
Okay. Yes.
Strapster, if
You're
you
gonna
will.
have to be on the prowl for him
I
in
know.
the
He lives
Raleigh
here somewhere, I
area.
think. Oh, goodness. Anyway, so that's my latest stressor. He probably
Yeah.
made me lose some hair, gosh darn it.
Yeah,
I
probably.
probably shedded some hair the day after I got back from that trip, all because of him.
Mm-hmm.
My cortisol spiked, seeing his
So
strap
high.
twisted. Oh, my
It,
goodness.
oh Lord.
But seriously, I think probably, for me at least personally, I think the stress and the sleep probably end up being, and dietary cysteine probably ended up being the most foundational.
Yeah.
If you want to take the biotin and the fancy schmancy supplements, more power to you. But I think go back to basics probably and good old run of the mill nutrition. And I'll say this too, going back to the cysteine thing. So when I did that NutriEval test, it showed cysteine was a little bit low and it showed glutathione was a little bit low. And you would think that would make me a raving fan of this test, right? Like, ooh, hooray, I figured it out. But that test is like $380. And you could spend that kind of money and get what feels like a very good answer. Or you could pay for the paid version of Chronometer for a month, pay $6 or whatever it is now, like
Right.
$6.95 something. You could pay for the paid version of Chronometer for like a month or two, track your nutrition, and you could get virtually the same information for dramatically cheaper if you just track your stuff in Chronometer.
Right.
And that's what I ended up seeing when I compared the two. I was like, oh yeah, they basically agree, but the difference is one of them's almost $400 and one of them would be like $5 a month.
Yeah.
So choice is yours, but make sure you're getting calories, make sure you're getting protein. A lot of hair care gurus out there tend to promote 100 grams of protein per day, which is, that's kind of a lot. That's
Right.
ambitious.
Yeah.
I'm 6 feet
Takes
tall and
work. It takes
190 pounds,
work.
and I find that challenging to do.
Yeah.
And I'm a big
Yeah.
lady. So
Big and beautiful.
that's right. That's right. You know it, darling. But yeah, I think we gave the people some value, I hope. And I hope that they figure out their hair care woes with the information we provided today. And I think that's a wrap, my darling. So we will see you guys in the next episode of the IBS Freedom Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Take care, and we'll see you on the flippity flip.